It's funny. People always be like, don't forget about the little people. It's like, why do they refer themselves as little anyway, you know? Why don't you just get big with me? Feel me? They can see it in my eyes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of John's Entitled Podcast, a partner of MoshPitNation.com. This week's guest is Andrew Mikhail, formerly of Oceano, formerly of Straight Line Stitch, currently of Serpents. Andrew has also been a hired gun for some other bands that you may be familiar with. We get into that in the conversation. Interestingly enough, this podcast chat actually got set up in a pretty interesting way. A lot of my episodes are on YouTube, and as such, I get comments on different episodes. And I got a random comment from somebody who had mentioned that they were a guitar player in Straight Line Stitch, and that they thought they knew me from when I had booked a band when they were, Straight Line Stitch, that is, was on the 36 Crazy Fist tour for the Bitterness to Star anniversary shows. I got one of the dates, and a friend of mine and I ended up basically booking most of that tour between getting flights and so on and so forth. So I have kind of a little more of a personal relationship with the Straight Line Stitch camp. Wasn't sure exactly who I was talking to because that band has had quite a few different members in and out of the band, so kind of hard to keep track. Like, I remember the funny thing being when I actually did the show with the 36 show, the image used that the band had submitted for our tour poster, our admin, half of the band ended up changing from that photo to what we ended up getting. So kind of case in point of just how much the lineup changes were prevalent with Straight Line Stitch. All of that being said, though, so someone had reached out to me on my YouTube channel, was commenting, we were going back and forth, and then, I think about a day later after my last interaction with whoever that was, I ended up getting a Facebook message on my podcast page, and it was from Andrew basically saying that he, if I would be interested in talking to him about Serpents and about his time in Straight Line. And I said, sure. And I was like, but I think you and I were just talking over on the YouTube channel. Like, why not just say something over there? Or, email me or whatever. And then I realized as a result that I was talking to Ian, who was formerly in Straight Line Stitch. And Ian basically told Andrew to hit me up and told him about the podcast. So without Ian and I's interaction, I don't think that this would have happened. And potentially I might reach out to Ian and see if he would like to come on and talk about his time in Straight Line and so forth. I know he's still making music and all that kind of stuff. Maybe not in an active realm as far as touring and so forth, but obviously I think he would have some interesting stories to tell about his time touring and so forth. But back to Andrew, though. So Andrew and I kind of were talking and getting this set up, and in doing a little bit of research, I was talking with a friend, the same mutual friend I've been mentioning, Alfonso, and when we were discussing that I was getting Andrew on, he goes, oh shit, dude was in Oceano, and I don't think he's ever talked about, what happened with that. And as a result of a few more people being around in the vicinity of the conversation, everyone was like, dude, I used to love Oceano, that first record, so on and so forth. And then basically the sentiment was, I don't know what the fuck happened, and I would love to know. You should ask him what happened with Oceano. Oceano was a band that I was very much aware of, but I was never really a fan of. Pretty much in the time Andrew was in Oceano, and Oceano was really making their mark, that was when I kind of was not an active participant in, the metal scene and so forth. But it's kind of interesting to kind of think about how this podcast and a lot of the people I get on, how they have kind of interwoven in my life between either being in a band that I have friends who knew and thinking about yo, maybe we did end up meeting each other or something. And as you'll hear in the chat, Andrew actually talks about how he lived here in Grand Rapids, where I live, and worked at one of the bigger venues here in town. And so I'm pretty much positive that him and I probably have met each other at least once as a result of me knowing most of the staff at that venue from having me book shows at the venue a couple of times over the years and so forth, or even some of the watering holes that he goes to while he spent his time here. So I kind of feel like maybe Andrew and I have actually met. I didn't know who he was, nor did he probably know who I was, which is fine. The shit happens, but it's just interesting to kind of think about how someone kind of weaved in and out of your life potentially, and you just never put two and two together. But with all that said, I enjoyed this conversation because we didn't really I'm trying to get better about not over preparing and having like 5 pages worth of notes to form a narrative and have my questions, have segues and so forth, and just let a natural conversation happen. I've been getting a lot of feedback that people enjoy the conversations I have where they're kind of tend to be really loose and more just natural conversations. And I tend to agree. Those are the kind of podcasts I like as well, although I do like more of a kind of a interviewee style as well. So, I mean, I kind of wrote some loose notes down. I had a lot of stuff I wanted to hit, but basically we just ended up focusing on Andrew's earlier time learning to play guitar and him being self-taught and how that's affected him in his professional career. Then into Oceano, and then basically into Serpents. Like I said, I really wanted to talk to him about some straight line stitch stuff, but it just never really presented itself. And by the time we kind of talked about what we did, and we were like an hour and a half in and so forth, I just didn't really feel the need to piggyback into something else at that point, just to get it discussed. But with all that said, the interesting thing though is the stuff on Serpents. He just dropped a new track. I want to say as of the time this is going up, maybe about a week ago. It's going to be at the end of this episode. So stay tuned and check out the new Serpents track. The interesting thing though is in this conversation I have, Andrew basically gives me, the full run of the new Serpents record, who's working on it, all of that stuff, how, the kind of the ins and outs of like how the concept of the record came to be, and all that kind of stuff. And as far as I know, that's not been said anywhere else. He hasn't really done any press for this new Serpents album yet. So this is going to be kind of interesting, kind of being the one that breaks a lot of this information. And I think what's really cool about it too is that given the fact that a big chunk of the material for this new record, at least the lyrics to it and the theme for it, all derived from, Andrew's time here in Grand Rapids. So I feel like it's kind of very fitting that a lot of this stuff gets talked about on this podcast with someone who lives in this area. So really looking forward to bringing this one to you. I think Oceano fans, if you guys are checking this out, I think maybe there's a glimmer of hope for some cool shit to happen maybe next year, but maybe not. I mean, that's kind of the fun thing about doing these podcasts as well, as you kind of get to fantasy book stuff, and sometimes you ask questions and it's kind of way up in the air, and I don't really know what's going to happen. And then a year later, you see some news like on different music sites, and you're like, "Holy shit, we talked about this thing, and now it's fucking happening!" Like that's crazy. So maybe this will be one of those same situations where a year from now, I'll look back and be like, "Man, we were talking about this on my podcast, and damned if it didn't fucking come to fruition." So yeah, all that basically being said, this was a fun chat, and I'm really thankful that Andrew reached out to me and gave me, about an hour and a half of his time to talk all things about him and Oceano and Serpents. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Andrew Mikhail of Serpents. So I have the pleasure of talking this evening with Andrew Mikhail of, well, actually a lot of bands that you may know, but we'll just stick to Serpents. But he has been the guitar player for Oceano. He has spent some time with Michigan's own Legend and Straight Line Stitch, Defiler, and I think Thick as Blood was one of the other ones that you were in for a short time as well. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, especially now that I'm talking to you.
Oh.
How are you?
Blushing now, thank you. So there's a lot to kind of dissect with your career, and I know we're going to hit on a little bit of all the bands, but I always like to get a little bit more of a sense of where someone came from as far as like some of their influences and just kind of their upbringing to kind of see like, oh, how, like, what was it that got you into either playing guitar or into heavy metal and so forth. So why don't you give us a little bit of a background on you and how you got into music and playing guitar?
Well, see, I was born. No, I'm just kidding. So I don't know, man. It's I've had I won't say a rough upbringing because my parents, were very good to me. Stern, strong Middle Eastern parents. You can't ask for anything more. Um, but essentially, I had gotten a guitar. I think I was 11 or to 13. I don't remember when it was exactly.
Hmm.
I was one of those kids that, worship music every day. I was listening to music, headphones on, no matter what I was doing, with my Walkman. And,
What are
you
those?
know, yeah, right. And, more props to my parents, by the way, for, letting me do that for as many years as I did and buying as many CDs on their dime as I did. But, that's another story. Um, So, I was one of those kids who day in, day out, I would come home from school and I didn't have much in my room because my bed was huge. So I had my bed and my dresser. So what I would do on a daily basis, whether I was doing homework or just literally sitting there looking at the stereo, I'd be listening to music on the side of my bed. And I would make mixtapes and whatnot, you know, listening to the radio and whatnot. And it came to a time where I just wanted to play guitar. I wanted to be one of those guys. And I would like play air guitar in my room. And eventually, my parents grabbed me a guitar, or, it was like a birthday present from the family. And, I just wanted to impact someone's life as they were impacting mine. I was always a big boy. I felt kind of alienated, and also being part of a Middle Eastern upbringing, I didn't have like the pleasure of like going out and like playing and having friends and whatnot. It was very, you know, uh, you're at home or you're with me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of thing. So, I was that kid that would play air guitar, and eventually I got a real guitar, and I never had lessons even until now, unfortunately. I wish I did, but, it was kind of like, hey, at least I got the guitar. So eventually, I never really learned songs like most guitar players do.
Hmm.
And I learned how to play just from writing riffs and learning, rhythms and whatnot. And, I would use the school's internet to print out tabs during like school breaks and whatnot. So all my teachers were cool with me. And like, in the middle of like lunch break, I'd be on the computer while everyone's like socializing, and I'd be printing as many tabs as humanly possible. And, trying to learn riffs, because my attention isn't the best. So I don't have the attention to learn full songs.
It's
But,
fun. I was gonna say
yeah,
it's
man, and
funny.
that's,
That sounds a lot like my upbringing actually. And before that train of thought kind of goes away, I wanted to hit on something real quick. You say that you're self-taught and have never actually really taken a lesson. Have you found in the career that you have with all the different people that you've had the opportunity to play with, that has that really ever impeded being able to jam with people or to learn these songs? Because that's kind of like something that I've always been really afraid of when jamming with people, is the fact that like I may not have the knowledge of somebody else does, and that they're not going to want to teach me either.
yeah.
Has that ever impeded anything at all, out of curiosity?
Only now. I mean, when I was getting into the industry, I guess I feel, I hate saying that. But when I was getting into the industry, everything was from the heart, from the cuff, groove related. We were all just like, here's a riff,
Right.
And it's only when I started jamming with other bands, like you were saying, where, like even now, it's like, you need to know theory, you need to know this, because I mean, if you think about it, so many young guns on like YouTube and whatnot, and undiscovered talent is so like theoretically talented and
Yeah.
technique-wise talented, and there's so much going on. And I almost feel outdated at times, but then I remember a lot of the times in my past where I literally had guys in my band, and one guy in particular, he played in a Dream Theater cover band, and he was Mr. Siri, everything. He was counting out like time signatures for the riffs and everything, and he couldn't play the songs. And I would ask him, "What's going on, man? Like, you're kind of fudging it up, And he would be like, "This is so complex. The rhythms are complex, and this and that." And I would just kind of laugh and shrug it off. But that was so crazy to me, considering I just write what I write, and then I joined a band where they'd be like, "All right, the opening riff is the area code to my phone number, so it's like 510." You know what I mean? I'm just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, sure." So, yeah, I mean, it's hurting me now, especially since I want to, partake in a little bit more professional environments if I wanted to go that route,
Right.
Mm-hmm. But that's the only time it's impeded on me. But, Straight Line Stitch, the guy I replaced at the time, that was Chris Norris, who was in Darkest Hour, and he's like Shredmaster, extraordinaire. And it's like, I was intimidated. I was like, I don't know if I could fill that shoe,
Right.
So it all depends, man. If you have heart and you want to do it, you could do it.
Yeah, it's always interesting, like when I hear people are self-taught and just kind of wondering, because it's like, I think that's a part of, especially someone like yourself who has been in a lot of other band, like you just said with Straight Line Stitch, like replacing somebody else. So it's like, not only do you have to know the material, but then you sort of have to, and something that I always find fascinating too is you have to be a knowledgeable enough replacement to where it's like you can play the parts that someone else either wrote or whatever, but then you also kind of have to put your own little spin on it, so you're not just basically, mimicking that person. It's like, well, you don't add any of your own flair to this. So I always think, like, basically being a touring musician or a studio musician sometimes can be really challenging, because it's like you have to fit this very complex role of like, we need you to do the job and do it very well. However, we need you to add a little bit of yourself into this as well, so it's not so very like robotic of sorts.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people stop and think about how challenging that really may be. And especially like, like you're saying, someone like from Darkest Hour, it's like, if you're replacing someone like that, I would just be like, nah, that's cool. So somebody else can do that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, you will have your bands that are like, we just want you to play. And that was like Legend, Legend, they were like, just play. And it was like it was very short, my time with them.
Yeah.
It was more like a fill-in status.
Yeah.
And same thing with Defiler. It was, we want you to play, but, we were open to your ideas. And then, and there's some other instances where some bands were like, do whatever you want, man. Make it your own. And I'm all about that. But, I can also play and kind of fit the character, but also secretly, add my flair or my attitude on stage. It's like, that's my interpretation of it, the performance.
Yeah. So, I mean, sorry to kind of cut you off on that. I just wanted to like quickly address that, because I haven't really had the opportunity to really talk to anyone that's been self-taught and not really ever gone through the step. Like, there are a lot of people, like, I think Kurt Hammond at one point is like, oh, I was all self-taught. And then it's like, but now I train with all these like legendary like musicians and have been trained in theory and all this shit. And it's like, oh, well, okay, so your self-taughtedness is like gone. So
yeah.
So I've never really had the opportunity to ask anyone who's self-taught, how it's been now as they're still in the, as you say, like as in the industry and so forth, and if it's something that they find easier because they're not so rudimentally defined by going like, okay, we have to play in this, box of notes and this scale and so forth, and it's more freeing because you can come up with ideas, or if it's ever presented problems with, getting in a room with people and being like, man, you guys are kind of talking a language I don't understand, like what, like let's just jam, and like kind of like that's the whole point of being in a band, and being in metal music a lot is like you just get in a room and you create shit, and it's like now all of a sudden it's like, here's my MP3 of this song. It's in this time signature. It's this is like the key I was looking for, or something like that. And you're just like, man, you're just taking all like the emotion kind of out of writing music. It seems like when people do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try and touch base on this real fast. So it's I think it's because as of recently, you know, I've had light training. You know, like I went on like Berkeley Online and like got a little certificate about like, you know, music theory and whatnot, and a couple other things. You know, YouTube videos and whatnot. I think it has actually seized up my writing a little bit because, you know, I've been working on this album for quite some time, and you know, I've been trying to write the next album, and there's definitely a change in attitude where, you know, when I'm writing now, to the point where I'm too busy trying to make it like make sense, and it's really hard to turn that off now.
Right.
But I can still do it and just be like, you know, whatever, just fumbling around, and then I'll come up with a riff, and then I'm like, oh, there I am. Here we go again.
Yeah.
You know, but now it's a little bit harder, and I don't like that. And that's what I was dealing with, you know, let's say that trained guitarist I was working with, and he was, when I was like, hey, write something, and he would send me, you know, Guitar Pro tabs of like perfectly composed, you know, shred opuses, and I'm like, I'm not liking this, man. Right. And then I would just hear my amp, feel it, and just like hear it shake the room, and then all of a sudden I wrote a riff, and I'd be like, hey, check this out, and then it'd be like, all right, how do you play that? And I show him, and then as he's playing that riff, I'll like mess around, and then I'll come up with something. But obviously it'll sound horrible when you're messing around, but once you come up with that complementary part, it's like, there it is.
Right.
And then something you can't really get from like theory, because I've had guys like counting, like, okay, you're in this key, and well, this would be complementary, or even how about this with the seventh? And I'm like, dude, just why don't you try this? I'm like, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's what has saved my butt. I don't know if I can swear on here, but you know, that's what saved me for right on. But that's what definitely has given heart to a heartless time, in a way.
Yeah. So didn't mean to cut you off on your upbringing as far as like getting into guitar playing and so forth. That just, like I said, as someone who watches a lot of YouTube videos and shit like that, and kind of seeing like people who can just shred, and it's like, man, you can shred for sure. You've learned like how to play this song, or you know, whatever. You learned like all these like virtuoso type, you know, players, styles, and abilities and so forth. But it's like, at the end of the day, can you write a riff? Can you write your own shit that sounds as good as the stuff that you're trying to do? And a lot of times people, like you said, like they just kind of like and they don't have like, they can't play to feel. And I don't know how much of that I've been trying to figure out is like due to the fact of how much technology we have to break everything down, and if it's sort of getting to like almost, I've been kind of thinking, is it like, is metal and shit kind of getting to the point of like where 80s hair metal was, where it's like it started as people who were so proficient in their abilities that it then became a level of like one-upping each other, but then it got to the point where instead of it be trying to inspire each other, it just got overly comedic and formulaic in the attempt and the process of making these songs. And so I'm wondering if like we're kind of getting to this same level with like, you know, hardcore and metal and shit, where it's like it's got to be so meticulous and fit in this specific box, like musically and all that kind of shit. And that's why, you know, we're kind of, I feel like there are certain bands like, you know, maybe like a Code Orange or something like that, where they're like doing just enough different shit that it's like making the scene interesting again.
Yeah.
That's just been something I've been thinking about.
I mean, even as like a musician or an artist or even a hired gun, one of the biggest, you know, you mentioned formulaic and out, you know, in the box. One of the biggest hurdles as a, you know, whatever right now for me is finding a band that needs a second guitar player, because everyone's using backing track guitars now.
Right.
Like, you want to talk about in the box and, you know, taking the soul out of things. I mean, that's it. And, you know, I posted recently, you know, I didn't really get the whole Code Orange thing. And then on a whim, I checked out that album, and I was just like, you know what? It's like, good for them, man. It sounds aggressive, sounds raw. It just has heart, and a lot of people, shit on
Yeah.
that record, and I just love how different it is, and it reminds me of what Oceano was doing back in the day. Everyone shit on us when we
Yeah.
first came out,
Yeah.
but people realized it was like an animal. It just had all these different aspects to it, and you wouldn't get that if I was like, no, 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 we need to be deathcore. We need to, play in this key. We need to do this, break down here, this and that. So it's, yeah, man, you really get out of the box when don't follow the rules, or in my case, don't know the rules. So,
But anyway, yeah. So back to kind of you were saying, that you didn't really play out much as a younger person, kind of learning how to play guitar. What were some of the like bands or players that were influencing you early on?
um, so back in the day, I was, I wasn't to metal. Funny enough, my mom and my dad were like, this is satanic stuff, blah, 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 So what I would do is I would go to my public library and I would work on, printing tabs as usual. And I would rent CDs. I would rent, Iron Maiden. I would, all this stuff. Anything with a cool cover, like Ozzy, anything like that.
Right.
And I would take it home and I would listen to it secretly. And then, eventually I became a metalhead, a closet metalhead. And, my friend, Mike Baker, shout out, he was like one of those guys that was like the cool guy. And, he had the cool pants, the cool CDs, everything was like on the up and up.
Right.
So, he's like, oh, have you heard Slipknot? And I was like, no. Or actually, I think it was Soulfly first. Soulfly was first.
Okay.
He's like, you like hip hop and stuff? I'm like, yeah, I like DMX and stuff like that. And he's like, I bet you don't know shit about Soulfly. And I'm like, what's Soulfly?
Right.
And he showed me, and I was hooked, like, because the tribal drums it's heavy, it was pissed. And I was like, this is awesome. And the lyrics were, kind of, you can get it at that age.
Yeah.
So it came from Soulfly, and then I got turned on to Slipknot,
Okay.
and then Fear Factory, and that was like my trifecta. Like the
That
Max
early
Cavalera,
Roadrunner
Dino.
stuff.
Oh yeah, Max Cavalera, Dino, and Mick Thompson was my favorite because he was the big guy.
Yeah.
I was the big boy. So, and from there, it would just like open so many doors. I started buying like Hit Parader and Circus and all that stuff, and I would see pictures of like Mudvayne and whoever, like Typo, and I would just kind of fumble into these bands because my library, had some of this stuff in there, and eventually, I just started collecting CDs behind my parents' backs, and eventually they were just like turn their heads, and they were like, as long as you're not listening to anything satanic. And I was like, no, this guy's singing about his tribe.
Right.
He's singing about politics, but secretly, I'd be listening to some pretty crazy stuff for a youngin'.
It's funny to think
So,
back when music was kind of scary like that, though, too, like where it had like a sense of edge. I was just recanting or retelling, I should say, the story of like when I had to hide Antichrist Superstar, and a friend made a tape, like dubbed a tape for me, and I would go to bed and I would listen to it on my like Walkman, and just being like in the dark, completely with headphones on and just listening to like this music I'd never really like no one had really ever heard before, and just being like, there's something scary about this, but I like this. I like being scared by this. Like it's like a
yeah,
horror movie, but like just a soundtrack basically. And
yeah,
I don't really know that. I mean, it's interesting too. We were just kind of talking. My wife and I recently were talking about how much music we all consume now, with music being at our fingertips. But I feel like because of how easily accessible it is, we've kind of lost like the connection to the music now. Like you don't hear people telling those kind of same stories where it's like, I had to sneak this album that changed my life. I had to like sneak it, and because my parents didn't like it, or because whatever, insert whatever the reasoning is. And I feel like we've kind of lost that.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, I've been saying this for a long time. Everything's so fast and convenient. It's like a new album will drop, today.
Yeah.
Today's Fridays. A few albums drop today. People are already on to the next thing. Like, oh, that was cool. Like, it's going to be on my playlist. But it's just like, what YouTube video can I watch right now, or what Netflix can I watch right now? It's like, it doesn't really sink in and marinate, as like they used to, because you buy like a $20 CD and you're like, I'm going to listen to this tonight. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're like, I'm going to enjoy it. Oh, there's a DVD in it. Oh, there's a secret track. Let me find it. Now it's like, well, let me hear what you got. Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to post about it. Maybe,
yeah.
It's definitely changed.
So when did you start actually like kind of playing with other people and start like the band thing?
Junior high, 7th grade. Again, I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a friend. His name was Corey, and I think he had a Slipknot shirt on or something like that. I was like, hey. He's like, hey. I was like, cool shirt. He's like, thanks. He's like, you play anything? He's like, yeah, I play drums. I was like, yeah, I play guitar. He's like, we should jam. Sure, let's do that. So, from then on, like so let's say Monday through Friday, school day. So at least 3 days of the week, I would walk 2 to 3 miles with my huge like coffin case with my BC Rich Warlock in one hand, and my, I don't know how many pound, combo Fender amp in the other hand. And I would walk every day, or every whatever day that I wasn't at the library. I would walk to his house, and we would raise holy hell at his house. And more props to his parents for letting us do that. But we started our bands from there, and then in high school, we started a real band. And everything gained like fast traction from like freshman year on. But essentially, I started like a 3-piece band in junior high. So I've been busy.
So, I kind of, something I've not really ever thought of. I mean, I've never really experienced it myself, but I was thinking about this when I was talking with Shiel from Bad Rabbits recently, and
good band,
very good band, and was thinking about, he was talking about how, in hardcore and so forth, at least in Bad Rabbits and even in the old metal band that he was in, Repress, it's a multicultural band. And, I had kind of wondered, was it kind of weird for him growing up? Like, were people like, you're a fucking drummer of like a metal band? Like, that's weird, or, things like that. Like, because I know that that's still a thing. And granted, I kind of had wondered, because I remember like the band Raw, when they came out in like the late 90s, how like the big thing for them was like, oh, the singer and a few, like I think maybe the guitar player were Middle Eastern. And that was like the selling point of that band. And so it's always kind of interesting to me, like when I think of various bands and people that I've kind of grown up, like, between like bands like Oceano, or like with yourself in them, or, Shield and Bad Rabbits and all this kind of stuff. It's not weird to me to see people of other I can never fucking say that word, ethnicities, in the metal or any of these other genres of rock, quote unquote. But it always seems like it's made to be a bigger deal than I feel like it needs to be. So was there ever like a thing where people, like when you growing up and being like, man, I'm into like this metal stuff and I play guitar, where people were like, that's weird, like you're into this? Like, did you experience a lot of that at all?
So with my culture and my family and my background, I am definitely the outlier. I am the black sheep of pretty much everyone I've ever met, who is Assyrian. That's what I am. Not Syrian, it would be Assyrian.
Okay.
Different. But it's definitely a more, I guess you would say, traditional or mainstream or even hip hop enthusiastic culture, I guess.
Okay.
And when I say traditional, I mean like traditional Assyrian or even Arabic music, which is where I get some influence from. But as far as that goes, they honestly never really caught on to what I was doing. You know, I was very quiet. My family, you know, was supportive later on. You know, they were supportive of me, obviously, from the beginning, but they just kind of didn't understand what I was doing and what I was doing with my life, you know?
Right.
It was just like, okay, you're going to play a show or you're going on tour? Like, all right, is that making money? You know, I'm like,
right.
You know, no, I'm gonna be doing this and, you know, I'm going to be breaking even when I'm really losing my ass.
Right.
But as far as that goes, you know, that whole culture, that whole world never really got it, you know. I still am known as like the freaker white boy, even though I'm 100% Assyrian. I remember I was even put on Wikipedia as like as a what's it called, an acknowledged, you know, Assyrian musician, and which is the first in heavy metal, I think, from what I'm concerned. And somebody took me off. Like, I think they don't know. Nobody really knows. I never really used it as a selling point for me. But
right.
when someone's telling me, like, my music rips off a band like Nile, so to say, you know, and I'm like, oh, you mean the Middle Eastern part? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you do realize I myself am Middle Eastern, correct? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I don't think any of the guys in Nile are Middle Eastern, but, you know, I will give them props and I will acknowledge them as an influence. But hey, let's do a little background check before you say something like that, you know?
Right. No, for sure.
So, you know, but yeah, I've had a little bit of struggle with that identity, I guess.
So kind of getting to, because I kind of want to get to Serpents, because I think it's really interesting when someone has like their own band and through other opportunities that arise, like the main band, like the we'll call it like a solo project of sorts, becomes the focal point, but then something else presents itself, and then it's like, okay, like here's kind of, it's funny because as I was thinking about it, I was like, you couldn't have picked a better name to talk about literally weaving in and out of something. It's like, that's kind of what Serpents do. They slither around stuff and kind of, you know, conform to, you know, their surroundings, like being able to move around. So I thought it was really kind of ironic, the fact that I was like, well, I kind of need to talk about Serpents. It starts, or, you know, Oceano starts and it kind of goes to Serpents, and then you kind of dip into something else, and then Serpents pops up with another, you know, EP or whatever. And so it's always been something that's kind of been like, seemingly like your thing, but kind of when the other things aren't taking you away from it. So I guess let's start with Oceano. I mean, because you're a little bit, I think I've got you by 4 years. I think I saw somewhere you were born in like 88 or 89.
88, yeah.
Okay. No, I was going to say, because I think by the time you were in Oceano was like, I think I remember hearing about that band a couple years after I was out of high school, so that would probably put it around like 2006, maybe 2006, 2007.
I think it was 2007 or 8. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Okay. There was, I mean, that's kind of, it's over 10 years ago, so, I mean, no worries that you can't remember it that well either. But I remember, you know, you guys, I think it's a mutual friend of ours, Alfonso Seville, when I was living in Lansing, was like, dude, you need to check out this fucking band, Oceano. They fucking rip. And I think you guys, like, I think the band was coming to play at Max, or maybe even the Temple Club when that was maybe still a thing. You're coming around regardless. And so he kind of he put that band on my radar, and he was talking about, you know, this sick guitar player and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of followed the band a little bit, but that was like when I was like living on my own and super broke. So like the luxury of buying CDs and music was like out the door. And
Heard on that.
yeah, and so it was one of those things. Like I remember, I think it was like your guys' first record. Like a lot of my friends were super into, and got played a lot. And then it just kind of seemed like the band for me, like either everyone just kind of gave up on it or the band went away. I never really could figure out which it was. But it kind of seems like based on when Serpents picked up was kind of at the end of when Oceano was done. So I don't think I've really seen a ton really about what kind of led to you leaving Oceano. Because I mean, by all accounts, everyone's like, when I told a few people I was talking to, they're like, "Oh my god, I used to love Oceano. Ask him about Oceano. Like, what the fuck's going on with that, or what happened?" And I'm like, "Is it not well known?" And so it seems
No.
like a lot. Yeah, okay, all right. So because when I talk to people about these interviews I'm going to be doing, a lot of it's kind of interesting. People give me feedback on and kind of fill in gaps of shit that like I'm not aware of. So, like I said, when I was talking about it, everyone's like, "Oh my god, I used to love that band so much," and I don't know what the fuck happened to him. And then it was like, "What do you mean? What the fuck happened to him?" They're like, "I don't know. They just like stopped existing." And I was like, okay, like I know bands do that, but like that's kind of weird. And so I thought there was like an official release or something, but maybe you pulled like some of these newer bands where they just disband, start new bands, and don't ever talk about what happened. So I don't know if you want to kind of get into the Oceano years and kind of since that was like your
Yeah.
one of your first bigger bands.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So just side note, just because I want to be nice and, respectful. Oceano is still around today. They recently signed with Sumerian Records. Well, when I say Oceano, I mean it's essentially the singer Adam
Uh-huh.
and a bunch of new cats in the band. Never really met the other guys. I know their new drummer, Matt. But yeah, so they're still doing stuff. I believe they're going on tour very shortly, if not right now. But it's few and far between. So that's they're still around, still doing stuff. But a lot of people, they do hold on to that first album, Depths. They hold it into a high regard, and for that, I thank everyone for that. Whoever still bumps that or says that's influential record, that's really big for me. But essentially, were you wondering about the like how Oceano came to be, or the exiting of Oceano?
How about the whole gamut? I guess if you're able or willing to talk about it.
Yeah, man. So basically, Oceano started around 2006 with a completely different lineup.
Okay.
All different guys. And I was in another local band in Chicago who was kind of feuding with Oceano at the time because me and their guitar player at the time, we were not on the best of terms, which is odd because, he was always at my old band shows. And he was, like one of those guys that'd be like, "Hey, man, I loved your set, this and that. What are you playing, this and that." And I always respected him, and I was nice to him. And one day he showed me the Oceano demo, the first one. And I was like, maybe you should try tuning the snare a little bit this, or I don't remember what I said, but he was just like, "Fuck you." And I'm like, "Whoa, what?" I'm like, I thought you wanted notes, man, because he asked me for notes. And so we were feuding that whole time. Eventually, I gave up with my band. And he was like, "You want to jam?" I'm like, "Fuck it, man. Why not?" So the first Oceano jam session with me and the guys was at Guitar Center. We jammed at Guitar Center.
Oh, wow.
One I worked at, actually. And so eventually, I was like, hey, if I join this band, it's got to be serious. Because back in the day, Oceano, I mean, a lot of the MySpace kids know the Gore Grind days. And I don't even have to talk about it. But back in those days, Oceano had no real lyrics. It was just noises, and people would sing along, thinking that there was lyrics. And I was like, if I join this band, it's going to be serious, and it's going to be metal as fuck. And we had a band meeting, and basically we all said, okay. I said, all right, let's do it. So from then on, things happened. We hit speed bumps with members. And unfortunately, we had to or we actually we were doing well, made a lot of noise, made a lot of ruckus by playing out, touring when we weren't, anything.
Right.
And eventually we got offered a deal with Earache Records. I remember getting that email while I was at work. It was funny. But, eventually we inked that deal, and then some members were acting a fool, and I said, I've worked too hard for this, and we've all worked too hard, and we're going to keep going, and this is what it's going to be. So then it became the Depths lineup that most people know, with Adam, me, Jason, and Danny. And then we had like a couple of guys coming in and out, filling in. Just didn't work out. So that was that, man. And we did that for a little bit. Did a great, circuit on that album. A lot of success. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of, us as a team dealing with what we dealt with at that time. And then when it came time to write the second album, to be honest with you, I never really talked about it publicly because I just felt it was our business. And, at that time, everyone was in everyone's business, and social media was like starting to really kick up. And it was like, so-and-so says this about, this person, blah, blah, blah. So when I got asked by, Lamb Goat and whatnot, like, why'd you leave? And I was like, here's my statement. It was very nice because I didn't want to burn any bridges,
Right.
But now that I'm older and things have happened and things have been said and done to me and all that stuff, I'm a little bit more open about it. But, essentially it all comes down to, the first album was such a success that, the second album, the pressure was on. And, essentially I became writing by myself, in a kind of solo, environment. And then I would take the demos and bring it to my drummer, and we would just jam, but we would mainly fuck around all day in the rehearsal space.
Right.
That we were paying for, which was new for me, being in an actual space paid for by the label, on the label's dime, they're waiting for a record, and they want Depths 2.0. Literally, that was the, phrase that kept getting thrown at me. And as an artist or musician, you just want to write, and you don't want to have that expectation.
Right.
Walking into a room, like, that was harsh, man. Walking into a room and being like, we got to make Depths 2.0, or even having me sitting in my room, just starting, they bought me a laptop. They're like, why don't you record demos? I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I've never done this before, but I'm going to try, Like, I was always jamming in a room with guys.
Right.
So, it was me. And, I'd come to the guys kind of sideways because I was stressed the hell out because I was the main point of contact, and I was also the songwriter, and I was also doing the business and the tours and, all that stuff. So on top of all of that, I was young, and also on top of all that, my parents were getting divorced.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And, literally one day when I was moving I think it was my mom's couch, out of her apartment because she was about to leave us again. I was sitting there talking with the drummer and, kind of checking in on progress. And he said stuff that, I wasn't happy with. And eventually I was just like, you know what, man? Fuck you. Fuck this. I'm so fucking done. My family's tearing apart, and, I'm being torn apart, and nobody's, no, you guys are family. We're not employees,
Right.
We're supposed to be family.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have each other's backs. And, that wasn't the best thing to do in hindsight, say, fuck you, but we were the world's, quote unquote, the world's most pissed off band. So emotional we were.
Right.
But, it just came to that point where I said that, and then management was calling me and, saying, no, like, don't do that. I talked to the guys, everything's good. And then, I'm like, fine. I calmed down, and they're already jamming with my friend at the time. They were jamming with him. And I was like, oh, I guess that's done. So that's literally how everything went down, man. And I never really talked about it. I don't think they've ever really talked about it. But at the same time, I wanted to paint that picture finally that, I was young and emotional, and there was so much on my shoulders for being so young. And it's just crazy. Like, I think I was 21 at that time.
Yeah.
And very confused, man. It's a lot of pressure. A lot of money, a lot of pressure being thrown at you at that age, I guess.
It's kind of interesting. I was probably a few weeks ago talking to Jim Hawking from For the Fallen Dreams, another like Michigan local band. Well, not
Love
really
Jim.
local. But he was talking about how when they did Changes, and then Changes blew up, and then basically from that point forward, everyone was like, "This isn't Changes. This isn't Changes. The next record doesn't sound like Changes." So everyone like kind of latches onto this one record and the amount of pressure it puts onto people, or just people in general. Like, I've talked to Nate from Finch, and one of my favorite records is their second record, which is the record that they broke up on because it just didn't do well and it caused a lot of problems internally and with the label and so forth. And I always find it interesting to think of, like, you're taking these young people who aren't even sure of who they are yet as a person, and you're making them responsible for making someone else money and having to come up with product at that point, because we'll not even call it songs or art, we'll call it a product because that's what it turns into. And just how hard it is to have to go through all of that as you're learning about, like, as it's happening to you for the first time, and just the repercussions of kind of all of that shit. So I've always thought it was interesting to kind of think about that. And I don't think a lot of people realize it's already hard and pressure filled to come up with a record on a label when they're putting forth a lot of money, but then when you actually have a hit or something that lands, and then the label expects you to churn out another one, and it's like, that's so much pressure, and you're like 21, 22. Think about where you were when you were that age, and like what life was doing to you, and then try to add on the pressures of like, okay, we need you to churn out another fucking record in 6 months, and if it doesn't sell all this kind of stuff, then we're going to tell you suck. And it's like, Jesus Christ. So
yeah. And we're in a time where music or fans, they will shit on a record if they don't like the snare sample. Like, it's very, very hard. And not only was I trying to make the fans happy, the label happy, it just came to a point where I wasn't making myself happy, and I was just like, everything's being torn apart, and it's not worth it. It's really not worth the emotional strain. And to be honest with you, side note, like, I had a really huge gig, huge to me at the time, lined up. So I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to be a hired gun for one of the biggest heavy bands right now. And they're still around. But that didn't pan out. So I was just like, I was kind of like, damn it. I really fucked up. And, I'm man enough and old enough to admit that, it's because I was like, well, these guys just want me to be a hired gun and play in the biggest heavy band that's out right now, and probably one of the most influential at the time. And I don't have to worry about writing a record. I could just play and get my anger out that way. And,
right.
I quit two weeks too late. They were like, damn, dude, like, we already filled the spot. I'm like, that's okay. That's fine. I needed to get out of that situation anyways. So
right.
It's, it is asking a lot of young people, and I in no way am I saying, woe is me, oh, this was so much. I welcomed it. I welcomed it in the sense of it kept me sharp. I learned a lot about business, the ups and downs, and, I wouldn't trade it in for the world. Like, literally, I love all of that experience I went through. And, but yeah, it's kind of wild if you think about it now, especially with a lot of the, I don't know what you want to say, awareness of things and things that happen behind closed doors. And I think a lot of people do forget that, I mean, there are some real shitty people out there and people doing really shitty things, but people seem to forget, like, a lot of people were growing up, on the road and confused and thinking, oh, this is Motley Crue status, like, I'm going to get fucking ripped every night, or I'm going to try and land 2 girls in one night, or this and that. It's like, it's a lot. It's a very sobering experience, when you go through that for as many years as, I've been in it, I guess. Very wild.
Yeah. Kind of a last question I'll have on the Oceano thing. With a lot of bands celebrating, a great record, or, anniversaries of a record, obviously, I think that record would have been 10 last year. But, some, like, Hatebreed's doing 15 years of, like, perseverance and shit like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be it just has to be like a monumental year, not like straight up like 10, 20, whatever. Would you ever entertain the idea of maybe, getting that lineup back together to do a run of, 10-year anniversary or 15-year anniversary shows, supporting Depths?
Actually, I think next year is going to be 10 years of Depths. I think it was released 2009, April 7th, 2009. I can never forget that.
Okay.
So it was when my life changed. Would I do it? Yeah. I mean, I think I would love to. Listen, here's one thing that, politics aside, band drama aside, one thing a lot of people forget, and whether I'm talking to you or if I'm talking to these guys I'm talking about, one thing a lot of people forget is that we made this together. We grew up together. We were a family together. We had those times. We all grew from that as human beings. And with that, so many other people grew up with us on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
We impacted so many lives, so many stories, so many couples met at our shows, so many faces were pounded in our shows. So many, it's like so many good memories, so many bad memories, and with these, like, I don't know what you would call it, these tours that are popping up,
nostalgia tours, sort of.
Nostalgia, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Nostalgia. With that, we would be, in my perspective, we would be robbing those people who held us in the high regard by saying, like, this is the best deathcore album, this and that, which I don't agree, but I'll take it,
Right.
But we would be robbing those kids or those adults now of that experience, and even the young kids that are coming in now, we would be robbing them of experiencing that animal that was that Oceano lineup. Now, Danny, Jason, and Adam, Adam's still at it. Danny, I think, he's kind of just a working guy. He has a couple bands in Chicago. Jason, from what I'm told, is a married man. I think in Michigan or Wisconsin, I'm not sure. So I don't know if he'd be interested or Danny would be interested in, like, doing a tour. But I know Adam's still out there. And I honestly, if this current Oceano lineup does a 10-year tour, I would really hope that, they would at least reach out to some of us or all of us if we would be interested in doing it. Because, I would. I miss those primal days of, my life, or my guitar playing even.
Right.
And I would be interested in doing it. I'd be interested in doing it even with the new guys, because, they're a 4-piece currently. So it's like they use tracks too.
Right.
So, I wouldn't say no, man. To be honest with you, no.
I just always think it's
We're
interesting to wonder about like some of these like seminal records within either a genre or just a time frame itself, and like wondering. I mean, I never thought I'd see 18 Visions, and I just came back from going out to LA to go see 18 Visions play in Los Angeles, and it's like, holy shit! Like when they were done, and when Mick Death, passed away, I was like, that band's never coming back. I missed my opportunity to see him, and so when my wife was like, "Do you want to go to LA and go see 18 Visions?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, I do."
Yeah, same thing with Hope's Fall, man. I thought Hope's Fall wasn't going to come back, and I was like, "Fuck, I missed that." Like. Even Misfits, they always said, like, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But honestly, personally, I don't think the Oceano thing will ever happen. Adam's pretty happy with where he's at with his crew right now. But I mean, I've reached out to him even to do like little guest spots in town, and it just never lines up. So, I mean, we're on talking terms, like me and the guys, minus Jason. I haven't really talked to him, but I wouldn't say no, man. I mean, from my perspective, at least.
Well, still got some time to maybe figure that out. So I know fans will probably really enjoy that. But kind of moving now on from Oceano, Serpents. I mean, that's what you're currently doing still. You put out a handful of records. There was actually, I mean, you were talking about it a little bit ago about how you've been working on this newer album. Is this still a continuation of the record that you didn't put out that I saw that was something about how a record is supposed to come out, I think about 2 years ago now, and it just never got released? And what I wasn't sure of, if it was like a Deftones Zeros thing where you have a whole record, it's done, you just haven't put that out, and whatever it is you're currently working on is all brand new material from that point forward?
So basically, after whatever, the Oceano thing, I immediately started crafting new demos, for something else, right?
Right.
I was like, I'm going to start something else. It's going to be, my big fuck you to everyone and the industry and everybody, blah, 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 blah. And I was very, very driven, by anger and spite and all that
how all the
stuff.
best metal records are made.
Yeah. Well, I was hurt. I was hurt by everything that was going on, and I was just like, I'm alone. I'm going to do this. And eventually, I finished some demos, and then I caught a drummer, and then I caught a couple other guys, and we put out an EP, like a small three-song EP or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was an actual like touring lineup for a while, and then it fell apart just because things weren't happening fast enough for some of the guys. So with that, we were a touring lineup for a little bit, and it turned into me by myself again, and I was just like, man, this music. And I had so many people telling me like, what are you doing with this album? This is awesome. This is blah, blah, blah. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to delete these vocal tracks, and I'm going to do it all myself again. So, because we had a singer. Well, good. I don't have to worry about lyrics and all that stuff. He was like my understudy. I would teach him these life lessons, these teachings I had. I think he was like 18, so he was like all about it. He was a good guy, man. And, he was very open-minded. He was actually too nice for the band, so he just kind of left. Like, this is too much.
Right.
He was like, this is too much drama. So, I would teach him these things that I had learned through whatever my experiences, and he would write about it. And then when he left the band, I'm like, well, I'm not going to use this now, So eventually I'm like, I'm going to rewrite it. Same subject matter, same, kind of theme. And then that's how Born of Ishtar was made. That was kind of my big fuck you piece, my, I'm going to do it no matter what. So I did that, released that record. And then the next year I released Pestilence, which is still kind of in that lyrical theme. It's kind of like a continuation of the story, but not.
Well, yeah.
And then
the timing of it, for sure.
Yeah. So Pestilence was out for a year, and then I got really busy with Defiler and signed probably the biggest, record deal of my life or my career, and had to sit for a year and wait for that to unravel and unfold. And in that year, I just, I mean, as you know, like you said, like Serpents pops up, throughout my year, whatever in between each band, whatever. So what I would be doing is I would be writing while I was playing for these other bands because I wanted to stay happy. I wanted to stay fulfilled. And so when I was in Defiler, I was writing in green rooms, what would become Serpent stuff. So then, after a while, after, the label dropped us before even, doing the announcement and all that stuff after a year, after a breakup and all that stuff, I was just like, well, I'm going to formally announce that I'm working on a new Serpents album and try and keep that up. And that's where everything kicks off from there to where I'm at now. 3 years of working.
It's it's always kind of interesting when someone says, it's taken us like 3 years we spent like 3 years working on a record. I think again, in talking with Jim, he was talking about how he's been writing this record that they just put out yesterday for like, I think about maybe 2 or 3 years really. And it's like the band was on a sort of hiatus, and no one really knew what was going on with it. And it's like it kind of gets it exciting because like we were saying earlier, in a day and age where it's like you're kind of like, oh, this thing's here, awesome. 20 minutes later, okay, I'm on to the next thing. That it kind of allows people to completely forget about something that they loved, and then when you kind of announce something, you're like, oh shit, I forgot about how fucking much I love that thing. And it's kind of the one byproduct I think of the way that people take in music now, or take in media really, or content as a whole, is that you can kind of, if you're gone for more than a year and you're not constantly posting shit, like people seem to kind of forget about it, and then when they get notified of like a new post or whatever, via all the social media and so forth, it's like you get really excited again because you're like, oh man, I forgot about this. And then you go back and if it's music, you might go back and listen to the back catalog and get almost like re-interested in something and just rediscover like your passion for this thing. And I'm sure it's kind of the same for you as well, like making this music, like like as you're kind of working on it intermittently in between, like working with other bands, maybe you're coming back and be like, oh my god, I forgot how much I love writing Serpents stuff.
No, and that's the thing is I've noticed, and I've actually publicly attested to the fact that I'm like, why do I even do this anymore? It's like no one even remembers, it's like I tortured myself for 3 years, and I'm like, with Facebook changing literally weekly, and their reach and all that stuff, it's like, what's the point? And then I keep having to remind myself, this is for me. Like,
right.
This is for my sanity. I mean, it's great that, there are actually people with like Serpents tattoos out there right now, and shout out to them. And I do that for them as well, because I'm like, oh shit, you got it on your body. Well, I have to keep it going now. But, I was at a time of like giving up. I was close to the, hey, I got a girlfriend, I got a nice job, blah, 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 I could still write or play for other bands, but I just keep coming back to that. Why did I start this? What does it mean to me? Do I care if, Facebook will shit on this? I mean, sure, but, it's more or less for those diehards that are like, what is Serpents doing? Let me go back to this album, and then when they click on Born of Ishtar, they're like, wait, what? There's a new one?
Right.
That's cool, man. I'm into that. But it's been a long 3 years. I spent 2 of those years method writing, and actually in Grand Rapids, oddly enough.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So how like actors would method act and they dive into a character?
Yeah.
So 2 out of those 3 years, like the music was done in a year. So 2 years I spent in Grand Rapids method acting or method writing, so I can really hone in on the relatability of the story, if that makes sense. Because I mean, the way I write is very kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to grasp if you just trying to like read it to read it.
Right.
There's a lot of hidden stuff everywhere. But this album, I was like, I really went through a lot, and I was like, I really want someone to be able to just pick up this album and really get it. And also, for someone who wants to look for hidden stuff, find it if they want. So I was like, write what you know. That's if you talk to any writer, that's the first rule of the book. Write what you know. So I said, well, it's about time to start that story. So I moved and lived out that storyline for 2 years.
So kind of just because of obviously Grand Rapids is where I live, and talking about living here for 2 years, you live in Chicago. What about our town, my town, I guess for those, I won't say ours because it's just me, but what is it about Grand Rapids that inspired you in your 2 years worth of method writing?
Well, inspiration came from the day to day. Like, basically, I was looking at a lot of formulas in writing and how the best stories are written, and it's usually Joseph Campbell's, approach of like the hero's journey or like the hero's myth.
Okay.
And some of the most timeless stories are, reminiscent of that formula. I mean, Star Wars, The Matrix, all that stuff. It's all kind of reminiscent of Campbell's hero's myth. So in order to do that, I needed to basically follow that formula and leave home and start that journey. So immediately I was like, well, I need to leave Chicago, number one, for my sanity. Number two, it was getting way too expensive for an artist to just sit there and, write and do that. So Michigan or Grand Rapids was, one of my favorite stops on tour. It was just a very laid back, cool, artsy kind of town, great beer, great, food.
Mm-hmm.
The girls were beautiful, everybody's cool. And, I was just like, man, it's cheaper to live there. And, it's what I need to do. Like, it's part of that journey. So I left and, I got situated, very fast and it was living very nicely for the money I was making and, given an artist, income. And, it made it very approachable for me to do that versus Chicago, where you need to be working 3 jobs to just get by.
Right. Yeah.
You could tell what's a more artsy kind of town. I would hate to say that, but artsy town, because, you have the option to do that. You can do that. You have the freedom versus, needing to work 3 jobs and then jamming with your band from like midnight to 4 a.m. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's tough, I don't know if that answered the question or just danced around it. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's one of those that you don't typically hear of a whole lot of people, musicians, coming to Grand Rapids to work on something or find inspiration in creating new art as far as musicians go. So it's not something I've really heard of. So it's kind of interesting to kind of like maybe get into that a little bit more. Was there anything, you kind of talked about our beer and such. Did you really have an opportunity to take in like our music scene here for the time you were here?
Roughly. I did a lot of my writing, or at least attempts at writing at like Meanwhile. So like, which is a, pretty cool punk bar, sort of punk, I guess you would call it.
We typically call that the hipster bar.
The hipster bar, right on.
Yeah.
Well, I was a single guy, so I was, I was out there with my cider, with my notebook, and I made some really cool friends over there. I got into the service industry over there and made a lot of cool friends in that world, which all kind of weaved into my storyline.
Yeah, for
but,
sure.
With that, I was introduced to a lot of really cool music, man. Stuff that was going on at Pyramid Scheme, the Intersection. And sorry for everyone who's listening that's not familiar with this stuff, but there's a really cool scene in Grand Rapids, and it's a shame that a lot of agents, as much as I love them and bless them, a lot of agents can't rationalize, taking that left turn to Grand Rapids versus going to Detroit on their way to Canada and stuff like that. So, which is a shame, because I was working at the Intersection as a stagehand, so I saw a lot of that going on, which is an amazing venue, at least from when I was there. I don't know who runs it now and whatnot, but
Still Scott.
it's awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, great team over there, very professional. I saw, Devin Townsend over there, which was amazing. And then I would go to P Scheme and just kind of check out Black Dahlia, or my friend Brandon Copeland does a lot of really awesome jazz hip hop shows and stuff like that. So and then you would have, and I don't know if I could say this, but whatever, but then you would have the Death House shows, which
Yep.
are super, super selective. If you don't know where it is, you're shit out of luck kind of thing. And I think that's so cool, man. It's a community. They built a community there, and I have mad respect for Grand Rapids, even though, my time there was forcefully, I literally made my life a living hell on purpose for the story. So, I mean, if I wasn't doing that, Grand Rapids would be so much fuller, and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But unfortunately, yeah. But yeah, I know a lot of the punk guys, that's why I mentioned the Meanwhile. It's because I would see those guys yeah, we're playing a basement show. And I'm like, that's so fucking cool.
See, I almost would have expected Mulligan's to be your one of the bars you would have frequented, with it being one of the few bars we have that has it's free to see shows. There's usually shows and now comedy from Wednesday through Sunday, and it's all about kind of supporting. What was that?
I'm a diva. I'm a diva. I couldn't get over that smell of piss, or no, not piss. That BO when you walk in. Yeah, it's just I'm like, ugh. But you know what? First bar I went to, as a Michigander, was Mulligan's, and this girl I was with was like, "You're gonna have a Mulligan stew."
Yes.
And I was like, "All right."
Did they light it on fire or no?
Yeah, I think they did. I don't remember, because we drank a lot, but
Yes. That is
yeah,
Mulligan's.
man. Oh yeah, and great town. I mean, it's a really cool scene, and I highly recommend any music folks to check it out. And even Art Prize, my first month in being in Grand Rapids, I was actually one of the exhibits for Art Prize. You know that?
No, I didn't.
I
was gonna say though, if you wanted to write, if you wanted to have inspired, angry and just pissed off lyrics, just try to drive anywhere during Art Prize, and I can imagine that should fill up a booklet pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I'm from Chicago, so it's
no, yeah, that's true
that's
too.
a lot worse.
Yeah,
but the inspiration on the Christian side of Grand Rapids definitely helped me.
Well, I was going to say, that was where I kind of wondered if that was why you chose us, because I know as of when I moved here over 10 years ago, a fact I had read, and if you spend any time here in Grand Rapids, it totally makes sense. I think we have more bars and churches per square mile than just about anywhere else, either in Michigan or in the Midwest at all. And I mean, I can think of just looking downtown, I can think of about probably at least 9 or 10 churches on the kind of outskirts, and then as you get more into the epicenter of downtown, there's at least 20, 30 bars. So I mean, it's it's all on display right there.
It definitely helped in the sense that so I would be at the bars kind of by myself or with my girlfriend at the time, whatever, and when I was sitting there, on experimenting with certain, whatever drug I tried at the time. Again, I was really getting into this writing process. It really hit me when I was sitting in a bar on Michigan Street. I'm not going to name it because I don't want to support him. But I was sitting there and I was like looking around, and I was listening to all these conversations, and people were talking about religion and politics, and people were trying to get into each other's pants and all this stuff, like most bars. But
yeah.
And I was sitting there and I was looking at everybody. And I says, "This is a small, cube in this city, in the middle of this country, in the middle of this world, and they're paying money to huddle in this building, and they can't leave this building with whatever they're paying for, so they have to huddle in here, and they're basically poisoning themselves slowly, and trying to fuck and suck each other." It was just like, it was such a weird experience to like be out of my body and like really analyze and be like, these people are paying, and I would see the same people there every day, and I'm like, there's more to life than this. But I was just thinking about like, this is, and like you said, there's more churches per block than anywhere in the country or whatever, and these would be the same guys that you'd see going to church or preaching about this and that, or telling you you're wrong for thinking this. And I was just like, it's such a weird contrast that it really helped me lose my mind and also get more out of what I paid for, so to speak, in the 2 years I was there.
Right.
Like, it was very strange, man. If you just kind of look at everybody as like a, like, I don't know, like almost like looking at an ant farm,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Again.
And that's one thing that helped in Grand Rapids, man, is that whole sense of entitlement and the constant challenge I would get. And that's honestly what kept me angry and kept me writing, is like, I would even, one time I had my ex, she jumped out of my car because I wouldn't agree with her viewpoint on, on burial traditions, because she just wanted to be right. And I'm like,
not everything is a right and a wrong.
Yeah. And I'm like, I have an opinion, and this is my culture. Like, why are you, dictating to me what's right and wrong? And that's honestly where I got a real strong taste of like that whole Grand Rapids vibe. And again, for everybody listening, it's not just Grand Rapids. I mean, it's a lot of other places.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's that whole like extreme like liberal viewpoint, and then there's extreme conservatives in Grand Rapids. And it's like, when people would talk to me at the bar, I would be very, like in the middle, or I'd be like, I could see what you mean. And I wouldn't contest them. I would be like, I see your viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And then I would say my viewpoint, and they would be like, you're wrong. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
This and that. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, why wouldn't you respect my viewpoint when I did that for you?
No, that doesn't. That doesn't go.
Yeah, and it helped me, and I wrote about it, and I secretly wrote, a lot of that stuff. A lot of my observations are in the new album. Yeah, man, it's the new album. It's actually called Temet Nosce, or it depends on who you're talking to, I guess, or Nosce or whatever.
Okay.
It's Latin for know thyself.
Okay.
It was called Nola Iris for a while, but I think Know Thyself is probably the best representation of this album. It really tells the tale of my journey from Chicago to Grand Rapids and then back. But also, with that, like, there's also, I went Kubrick with it, and I told about 5 parallel stories.
Okay.
Within that text that anybody who's paying attention can latch onto and really get involved with that.
Okay.
But essentially, essentially, man, this is the tale of me going on that journey and coming back as as a better person. And or you can look at it through all these 5 other storylines. It all depends. But Grand Rapids was definitely rich with influence for that album.
Do you see yourself doing, maybe after the album's been done, rolling out with like a YouTube series maybe of you kind of explaining everything, so people can, like, after time goes by and if people haven't kind of figured it out, you're able to kind of explain it to them? Or is this one where you want, like, if they don't get it and you're like, well, then you got to keep listening, and when you find it, then you'll kind of, you got to search it out and kind of find it for yourself?
In the beginning, I was like, why am I putting myself through this hell? Why? I mean, nobody's going to get this stuff. And then I was like, well, I'll just explain it to everyone,
Right.
I was like, I'm going to do that. Make a YouTube thing, or, release a commentary version of the album.
Right.
So then, in my deep dive into, art and literature and movies and whatnot, I stumbled on something Kubrick said, where he's like, I'm not going to tell anybody about this movie. I'm going to let them paint the picture for themselves, because it gives them more of a sense of ownership, I guess you would say, to that
sure.
piece. That's why I gave people 6 storylines altogether. It's
Right.
like whatever you grasp onto, whether you're an occultist or, just want to listen to a story, or you want to listen about my story, it just, whatever you want to latch onto to make it yours, it's there for you. So I don't think I'm going to be explaining, publicly at least, about these songs and whatnot.
Okay. And then, so when can we expect this album to come out?
We're hoping, or I'm hoping. Why do I say we?
No, I do the same. I do the same thing. It's me, and I say we and
Man.
us and ours, and it's just me.
That's when you know. That's when you know I've lost my mind. No, I'm just kidding. I'm hoping March or April. Right now, as we speak, I'm waiting for the final master for the first single. It's called "The Lust of the Lawless." It should be dropping in a week from today. I don't know when this will air, but so if you're listening at this point, it's out. Go listen to it. So yeah, we're gonna, at the end of this episode, you will hear the newest single, "The Lust of the Lawless," off of Temet Nosce. At that point, I'm hoping you'll be able to stream it on Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff, under Serpents US. But yeah, I mean, right now, everything relies on the success or failure of this single. I mean, I'm fully funding everything as normal, but I'm actually working with a producer, Logan Mader,
Okay.
who has done Five Finger Death Punch,
Mm-hmm.
Fear Factory, Gojira. So I really wanted to do this album right, and I think I would be robbing people if I just did it myself and half-assed it and be like, well, I'm going to fulfill pre-orders and I'm going to just get it done and get it out there. So right now, I'm working with Logan and on this album. Everything's tracked. We just need to fund it. So if you guys are liking the single that you're going to hear at the end of this episode, please head over to all the pages and pre-order the album, because
There will be a pre-order going live with the release of this single.
There's been a pre-order, and honestly, that's how everything has been funded this whole time.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank everybody for pre-ordering and being patient. So many people, have been so patient. And it really is inspiring alone, and how people believe in this project and the album, to the point where they haven't even heard, what has come out. But I've had a lot of pledges, or whatever you want to call it. People just really, they're down for the cause, and that's what this is about, man. This is about supporting art in its truest form. I mean, this is a no bullshit, project, and that's what I wanted to do since day one. Is have it be true, have it be, raw emotion. It's just, if you support this stuff and you still want to see more Serpent stuff later on, then please, pre-order that stuff. And if not, I'm just going to be working like a dog, like I already do. And you guys will have to wait longer for the record. And Logan would not like that. I would not like that. And I'm sure the people who have ordered would not like that. So let's get some orders and, get that new album in your ears, because from what I've heard, it's with Logan and me kind of like teaming up, and it's just monstrous, man. It's awesome. I'm really proud of it.
So we've already got the song that I always end the episodes with out of the way. So where can people find you? What is the link to the pre-order for the soon-to-be completed album, hopefully?
So everything is located at trvemedia.com
Okay.
/merch.
All right.
So it's truemedia.com /merch. You'll find pre-orders for the new album, like bundles.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find a tarot card deck that I released, a little bit ago. Some T-shirts, some old copies of the old CDs. But we're really, anything helps, man. And, we're getting there. And, if any labels would like to release this, let me know, because that would save me a lot of hassle. But essentially, yeah, man, it's all DIY. So if people are digging what I'm doing, then please support it. It's just like any other art, If you like an artist, if you like a painting and you really want to support that artist, you'd buy it,
For sure. Well, I thank you for your time. I don't know if you were planning on spending an hour and a half with me on
I'm
your
all
Saturday.
for it, man.
But thanks again for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you for talking to me. Thanks to everyone who's listened this far. Sorry, I don't mean to get all, I'm going to thank everybody. No, but, I honestly want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their support, for Oceano days to now Straight Line Stitch days. I mean, everybody has been great. I couldn't have asked for a better career, even if it all ended tomorrow. Granted, the past 3 years were purposefully spent in hell. But now I'm done with this album, essentially. You're going to see more of me. I'm living in Austin, Texas now.
Oh, I just was there a little
take
while
a break.
ago.
Well, you should have hit me up. South by Southwest, holler.
We didn't know each other back then.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I needed a new challenge. I was done with writing and all that stuff. I was like, well, time to challenge myself. So here I am in Austin. If any of you, see me around, don't be afraid to say hi. And I hope everyone enjoys the new single, and I really hope you guys enjoy the new album and try and stay sane in this world. That's all I have to say.
So that was my chat with Andrew Mikhail of Serpents, ex Oceano. Had a lot of fun talking with Andrew. Kind of covered a lot of different ground. Like I said in the intro and kind of during the conversation, not really being the biggest Oceano fan, it's kind of always interesting to talk to someone and look back at it during a time frame of something that meant so much to a lot of people, and kind of being able to look back on that and kind of be a little detached from it as well, since it didn't necessarily have as much of an impact on me personally. But as I said, a lot of friends, when they found out I was talking with Andrew, really were interested to find out what happened and so on and so forth. So I know it obviously had a huge impact on a lot of people. So I'm really hoping that this interview finds those that maybe have wanted to know for the better part of almost 10 years at this point of what happened and what Andrew's really been up to. Because interestingly enough, in doing this podcast, I tend to find that a lot of people that I talk to, the common response to these interviews is really, oh, I always wondered what happened to this person during this, or, what was going on during this time period. I never have gotten any information. And I guess the odd thing is, in today's society where we have literally a wealth of information at our fingertips, I guess not being able to know something is kind of is not the norm. And so I guess a lot of people are able to kind of get some answers to the questions that they've often had. I know that's been like the biggest case with the Revis episode that I posted a while back with Justin from Revis, that a lot of people comment on the YouTube channel that they, are thankful for the episode because they finally have some closure as to what happened with that band and with him and all that kind of stuff, and are able to kind of find out that he's got new music. I know Eddie Trunk constantly talks about people that are fans of his, that are fans of bands from the 80s and early 90s and such, that they basically lost track of what that person was doing, or someone from the band, and didn't know that they're still creating music. So hopefully this is definitely an instance for any Oceano fans that can keep up with what Andrew's doing, that he's got this new Serpents record coming out. And if you would like to keep up with Andrew, though, the easiest way to do that, just like anybody else, is following them on his socials. You can follow him. You can follow the band Serpents at We Are Serpents on Facebook. If you would like to follow Andrew, it is at, well, not him personally, but if you would like to follow one of his other accounts as well, it's under True Media. That's TRVEMEDIA. You can find him on Twitter, just simply at ANDRUCIVER. I'm not going to necessarily try to pronounce that, but that's pretty much his handle on everything. You can also follow Serpents on We Are Serpents on Twitter, and Instagram is just ANDRUCIVER. I think it's Anduciver or something like that. I don't know. I'm kind of bad with some pronunciations on things. But yeah, just find him on that, and then you can keep up with what he's been doing as far as trying to help bands with social media work and logo stuff, and just kind of a lot of band going-ons that he is able to offer services for bands, as well as Serpents itself. And if you would like to follow Mosh Pit Nation, you can follow them at moshpitnation.com. You can follow them on Facebook at Mosh Pit Nation West, capital MI. Facebook or Twitter and Instagram are simply Mosh Pit Nation. You can find me on Facebook at John's Untitled Podcast. Also on Instagram. Twitter is just John's Untitled Pod. And you can email me at johnsuntitledpod@gmail.com. YouTube, again, it's John's Untitled Podcast. A lot of people seemingly are finding the podcast through that means. I know I listen to a lot of random interviews and so forth when I'm trying to do research. So hopefully a lot of people are enjoying finding it through that avenue. Someone commented on my Mike Dean episode that I posted last week that they were really appreciative of the episode, that they don't have many corrosion conformity interviews on YouTube, which I think is partially incorrect, but be that as it may, it always kind of makes my day when I get a lot of interaction from people. I like to reply to everything and kind of just start a dialogue with whoever about different shit, and sometimes it leads to episodes like this one. I was talking with Ian from X Straight Line Stitch, and as a result, I ended up getting this conversation. So talking to all of you never know who I'm going to actually end up getting as a result of doing this. We're going to end the episode, as we always do, with a song, and that song is going to be the new Serpents track, Lust of the Lawless. If you like this track, you can go over to True Media, that's TRVEMEDIA.bandcamp.com, and you can get the song. If you would like to pre-order the new Serpents record, Temet Nosce. I'm pretty bad with not English things. It's TEM. So that record is Temet, TEMET Nosce, NOSCE. As you heard Andrew say, he kind of explains what the meaning and the breakdown of the meaning of the album title is all about, especially lyrically for the theme of the record. But if you are interested in pre-ordering the full record, you can do such over at True Media. That's TRVEMEDIA.com/merch. Again, basically that's a lot of Andrew's socials. If you want to follow this, TRVEMEDIA, and then usually if you search that across Facebook and so forth, you'll also find Andrew that way. But this is the new song. I got it sent to me before it had been premiered a few days ago as of the time of me recording this. And Andrew asked what I thought of it, and it was it's always interesting to be asked my thoughts, because as a not really great musician, I always think it's funny when people ask me what I think of music, of someone's music that they've created. And I always feel kind of bad, because I often compare it to something that it reminds me of, and I usually mean it as like a good thing, but I never stop to think that, like, oh, maybe this point of reference for me, while I think it's something good, could mean it's shitty to somebody else. So I ended up messaging Andrew, and I was like, yo, the song's really good. Like, some of the parts remind me of like early Dimmu Borgir stuff off of like Progenies of like the Apocalypse or Misanthropic Period, that long fucking title that I can never get. But that has like puritanical on it and stuff like that. The synths and the way that they kind of come in and out of the guitars and stuff like that reminds me a little bit of early Dimmu. And I also said that I really enjoyed the vocals, because in a lot of more aggressive, death metal-y kind of stuff, sometimes the vocals there's just so much going on that it's hard to discern the vocals and what's being said and so forth. And I didn't have that problem with this song. But as a whole, looking forward to this new record from Serpents. Logan Mader, who is producing it, who has done Five Finger Death Punch, Gojira, and Fear Factory, among other great metal artists, will no doubt crush this fucking record. And as you will hear from the new song, Lust of the Lawless, I think we're in store for a very brutal, aggressive record. So, without further ado, this is Lust of the Lawless by Serpents. I will talk to you next week.
Your passion, your belief, shows all the same.